Hello again, ladies and gents. Hopefully that was a useful half hour of your time to get around the room, meet lots of new and existing people that you know. And after my talk with Gary, which will be for 15, 20 minutes or so, we will keep the room open for you to continue those conversations, whether on a one-to-one basis or on the tables. And I will now move it on for the next 15 minutes or so and introduce Gary up onto the screen. And Gary is, as I said earlier, a sales and leadership guru. And today we're talking about EQ, emotional intelligence. And I'm not going to be the one to tell you about it. I'll leave that to Gary. But I will just say that if anyone has any questions, whether it's about sales in general, their team in sales, or anything you'd like to pick Gary's brain about, now is a good time. And we would recommend doing that in the Q&A area on the right-hand side. So not in the chat box if you can avoid doing that, because it gets quite busy. Along from the chat box, you'll see the Q&A area. So pop it in there and I'll pick it up as we go. But hello, Gary. How are you, mate? You okay?
How you doing? I'm very good. Good networking as always, Brad.
Fantastic. Gary, well, we'll dive straight into it. And as I say, today we're going to talk about EQ. And maybe a lot of people have seen EQ out there in blogs and on social media and gone, well, that's a new buzzword. That's gone over the top of my head. So in simple terms, Gary, what is EQ? Because you've recently got an accreditation, or what is it? So give us in plain simple terms.
Yeah, so first of all, so I became certified. I was already certified, I think, but certified as an emotional intelligence practitioner just during lockdown. I've been working on that for the last couple of years, but was made aware of it about 20 years ago by one of my former managers. And to put it kind of simply, really, emotional intelligence is really it's a set of emotional and social skills. That's what it is. We all have emotional intelligence. The important thing is, though, is knowing how to use that emotional intelligence. So, it can help us to develop and maintain relationships. It can help us to cope with challenges. And also, if in a sales environment, it's about picking up on that emotional information from yourself, but also the prospect or the client that you're selling to, so that you're able to adapt your communication to suit that emotion, if you like, as well. So in the nutshell, emotional intelligence is a set of emotional and social skills that basically influence the way that we perceive and express ourselves as human beings, first and foremost.
And would you say at this point in time, I mean, you've mentioned it there, dealing with setbacks, objections, resilience, that sort of thing. Do you think at this point in time, given the current circumstances, that, emotional intelligence is more important than ever, and sort of developing that as a skill set?
100%. So within the EQI model that I use, it's called EQI 2.0, and there's 6 kind of composite scales, if you like, and what they are, Brad, and to the rest of you, they are self-perception, self-expression, interpersonal, decision-making, well-being, and stress management. And as you can appreciate right now, the well-being, the stress management, how we as individuals, especially working in business and selling, or being owners and leaders of businesses, we really need all the help we can get. But it's dealing with that stress tolerance is taps into your impulse control. So when you're under stress in the sales, you really got to hit those targets, or that you really need to get some new clients. Stress can really mount, in us, and it can actually change the way that we interact with people. We can therefore come across as too desperate. And that can look in 2 ways. That could be that we then appear too pushy, or we end up, this is a more of a common thing, really. People end up giving away far more than they ought to for the money they're charging, because of the stress. They need the money, and something's better than nothing. And it's just about using your emotional intelligence, being in touch with your emotions, in being able then to communicate more effectively in your interaction. So in terms of resilience, you know, in terms of overcoming setbacks, it's an absolute must for me. You know, it's certainly helped me in the last 20 years that I've been aware of it. I thought I was good at selling, you know, and it wasn't until I became aware of emotional intelligence and realized that actually I score in the higher region in terms of emotional intelligence, that's a massive factor in why I've been able to sell all sorts of products and services over the years. So yeah, in answer to your questions, Brad, absolutely critical right now, especially in the times we're living in.
Yeah, you talk about the effects of having different varying levels of EQ and the impact on sales. So what in particular, having a high level of EQ, do you see that having an impact on sales? Where do you see, you know, what's the tangible sort of link and the effects of having that high level of EQ?
Yeah, so bottom line, people who have high emotional intelligence tend to sell more. And not only do they sell more, they're able to sell in a way where the customer or the client or the prospect doesn't actually feel that they're being sold to, because, you know, it's all about that perception. They're able to be self-aware of their feelings, their emotions, what they're portraying. So some of the more tangible things are that you find that you will build people that with high emotional intelligence, they build better relationships, and therefore they're able to, because they're in a better relationship with people, they're able to sell more. They're able to be more optimistic, and therefore that means that even if things aren't going as well as they'd like to, they don't kind of want to put their kind of duvet over their head and just or bury their head in the sand. They think they have this ability to bounce back. So I call it stickability. They're able to whatever it is, they're able to stick at it to the conclusion of whatever it is. So, you know, in terms of rejection, you know, in sales, we have to understand that, especially if it's prospect selling we're doing, we're going to have a lot of rejection. That's a must. You know, you're going to get rejection. You're going to get people saying no. But the most important thing is how do you then show up on the next call or on the next meeting or the next day? Do you just think, well, I tried it selling once and it didn't work for me, you know, so I now just don't bother. I just hope that I can come to a networking event and all of a sudden I'm going to get all this work coming my way. If that's your thinking, I'm really sorry to, you know, you may get some business, but you won't be able to grow your business by just coming along to a networking event and thinking people are just going to, you know, want your products or services. You're going to have to learn to sell. And that's what I'm seeing right now. You know, selling is absolutely critical post-COVID.
Yeah. And that's a great lead into the next question that I had, really. It was, what are you seeing out there at the moment? What's really been an evolution in the sales world going into where we are now? When we spoke earlier in the week, you sort of mentioned there's two types of people out there when it comes to sales. So what are you seeing with the companies that you work with the individuals that you work with?
Yeah. So the two types of people I see really are those people that are too pushy. They sell, you know, when I learned, you know, selling 20, 30 odd years ago, I remember when I worked for Yellow Pages, we would make a cold call to sell advertising space. And we would actually say in the introduction, we'd be saying something like, oh, and by the end of this call, Brad, I'll be looking for a decision from you. You know, and it was so pushy. When I look back now, I almost cringe, but it was okay 20, 30 years ago. We got away with it. Now, if you are too pushy as a salesperson, people will just switch off. So that's one type, being too pushy. How do they show up? In networking, they're normally the people that talk at you. They're normally the people that are talking all about themselves. And if it's a physical networking event, they're normally the ones that are thrusting business cards into your hand. You know, they almost say hello and shake your hand with one hand and pass the card with the other. So it's that pushy type of characteristics, I suppose. And then on the other end of the scale, we've got those individuals that are just scared of selling. Maybe they've tried it. Maybe they tell themselves, look, I'm really good as a web designer. I'm a really good personal trainer. I'm a good solicitor, accountant, whatever you may be, but I'm not a salesperson. Well, unfortunately, you then become the best kept secret because you've got a great product or service, but if you don't tell people about it, if you don't sell it, people aren't going to get to know about you, unfortunately, or not enough people for you to sustain your business post-COVID, for sure. You know, you may have got away with it from different marketing before COVID, but now we're going to have to be more proactive. So that's what I'm seeing, unfortunately, Brad, is that a lot of my clients or prospects that have now turned into clients during COVID, I'm seeing that they have sales teams that are either too pushy or they're not making any calls. Because that's the other thing, is how many emails are salespeople selling? And when I say salespeople, even people listening on this session today, who may be business owners or directors of a business, you know, who are still selling the business, if you like, the products or the services. But my question to them is how many emails are you selling or sending? Because I'm seeing there's too many. There's far too much reliance on emails. We have to be braver. We have to be bolder and pick up the phone. Pick up the phone and speak to people, because that's going to make all the difference going forward. Because we're going to have, you know, I was talking to some people in one of the sessions earlier on, actually, on here today, and they were talking about they feel that some people are just too optimistic at the moment. Well, I think optimism is really important and a positive mindset really helps, but we do have to be realistic. And I do think post October this year, when the furlough currently is going to come to an end, businesses are going to have to make some really tough decisions. And don't forget, some of those businesses would have deferred VAT payments and any other payments at the HMRC. They would have had to have paid those by now. But because of COVID, HMRC has given people some leeway. Well, they're going to want that money at some stage. They're not going to write that off, I don't think, right? So you're going to need to make sure that you have enough money coming in post-October and beyond to make your business sustainable. So those are the things I'm seeing really, Brad, is either people that don't are too pushy still, or businesses where they don't really have salespeople that are being proactive. They're hiding behind email. So that's what I'm seeing at the moment.
And let's finish off with some tips and some things that people can take away and maybe start implementing, you know, after today's meetup. You know, what are some of the traits that you think people can work on developing in this new world that we're in, or even some tips, if you were to sort of give three tips that people can take away?
So the first thing I would say is telephone skills. You know, look at your, you know, identify whether it's yourself or within your team. If you're a leader, have a look at your team and have a look at, you know, most software, telephone software nowadays will tell you how much, how many calls and how long those calls are lasting. And the reality is, if you've got anybody, if they're in a sales role and they're not making approximately 30 to, depending on the business, 30 to 100 dials a day, or approximately they're not spending about 2 hours talking to people on the phone, then you need to really consider whether they are right for your business or whether you are right for them, depending on which way you're looking at it. So that's number one, telephone skills. Number two is follow up. The treasure is always in the follow up. You know, nowadays, there's very few people that you're going to meet them networking, or they're going to inquire about a product or service that you're selling. There's very few people that are going to just say yes straight away. You know, unfortunately, it's going to need some kind of follow up. And some follow up, you know, the average in the research that I look at, it takes about 8 follow up calls before a prospect says yes. The sad thing is, most salespeople, even if they do make a follow-up call, they give up after one. So you've got to put the effort in, so that's number 2. So make sure you're following up on any inquiries and any leads. And the third thing is, and the third tip I would give, in fact, I'll give 4 actually. One is with the emails. Unless you can say at the beginning of the email, you want it to say, "Hi Brad, following on from our telephone conversation," and then go into the copy. If you can't put "following on from our telephone conversation," you need to really justify that. So that's a really good measure for everybody. Just justify why you haven't put "following on from our telephone conversation." And then the second point that I'd give, it adds into the follow-up. A couple of years ago, even myself, I had lots of clients or prospects interested. And when I was following up, or my team were following up back then, we just couldn't get hold of people. We emailed, we left good voice messages, we were doing telephone calls. And so what I did was I went through my database, and the ones that we had mobile numbers for, I started to use WhatsApp. And what I did was I recorded a personal message to them. So it's just something simple like, "Hi Brad, we spoke a couple of weeks ago and you was interested in sales training. Me and my team have found it really difficult to get hold of you, but I really would love to follow on our conversation. And would you please just give me a call on 07961 910 694 or drop me an email just to let me know how you are, how things are going, if we can continue our conversation." So it was like a 30 to 60-second video, really. And then I would just send that through WhatsApp.
Yeah.
And I've been doing that for 2 years. And again, it's an incredibly powerful way to connect with people, because the majority of people aren't following up. So your competition, they're not following up, whatever competition you've got. And they're certainly probably not using video as a follow-up tool through WhatsApp or whatever, however you want to do it. So those are my 4 tips, really.
Fantastic. And you can also do that now through LinkedIn Messenger as well, whether it's a voice note or a video. So definitely would encourage that. One question to finish, Gary, which is coming from Chris Lane. He's asked, how do you apply EQ within the confines of a single industry, e.g. selling professional services to just one industry? In his example, he's used aviation. Does that come across? Does that make sense?
You know what? The great thing about emotional intelligence, Chris, is because it's human. We all have it. The difference is that some people may be in what they call the norm, so in the middle, the average, if you like. Some people will be below the average, and some people will be higher than the average. But the great thing is, Chris, everybody has it. Everybody has emotional intelligence. So actually, in terms of selling, as long as you work on your emotional intelligence, you will sell more. Whether you're selling within aviation, whether you're selling insurance like Preston Insurance that are sponsoring today, whether you're selling networking services or networking business like Brad and the team do, whatever you're selling, training and coaching that I do, emotional intelligence is almost the DNA of selling and life anyway. So yes, it can be used in any area. And if Chris, you want to talk to me on a one-to-one, how we can make it more applicable to your business, more than happy to do that.
Fantastic. Great. Thanks, Gary. And Gary will be in the room for the rest of the session. So if you do want to utilize the one-to-one area, we recommend doing so. But we've just run out of time now, Gary, before we get back into the room. It's been a pleasure to have you with us. So it's always good to chat, Gary. So as I say, Gary will be in the room for as long as you want to stay around. And also Gary's running a EQ webinar at the end of September, which we'll share details about. And he's given Network My Club members a discount. So we'll make sure that we share that as well. But thanks very much for your time, Gary. Appreciate that.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Nice one. Thanks very much, Gary. And brilliant. That concludes this part of the meetup, and we can go back into the room now as a